If you want to improve your accuracy in archery, there are three fundamental principles: aim, anchor, and alignment. At its very core, archery is not that complex. The goal simply is to get this arrow moving in a line towards the target. If it's a little further away, you might aim a little higher. It's not hard. If you are able to put a bow into a shooting machine, it should pretty much hit the same spot every time. But we are not shooting machines. Instead, you'll always have that one arrow that doesn't want to group with the rest. Or for some of us, it's every arrow. But again, if archery is simple, that you just have to move this arrow into here, what exactly makes it difficult for us to replicate that consistency? What I'm going to explain in this video isn't a method or a process. This isn't a step-by-step guide on how to shoot well. This is a practical framework. It is the language that I as a coach would use to help people diagnose and troubleshoot what they might be doing wrong. This is intended for beginners to help them identify the things they need to work on. So from day one, as an absolute first-time shooter, you know how to get the arrow onto the target at the very least. This is also a reminder for intermediate archers who may be struggling with the current form and process to look at specific fundamentals and address the causes of these faults. This is meant to be a way to engage with yourself or with your coach in what you can do to improve. Before I explain the concepts, I want to go through a problem that we might have with coaching or self-teaching, and that is tunnel vision. For the beginner archer, getting their first bow, shooting in the backyard or the first time at the range, the fixation is more often on aiming. Where do I point the bow to get the arrow to hit the middle? If it goes too high, you just aim lower. If it goes too low, you simply aim higher. That's the basic troubleshooting that someone who is self-taught or has no instruction will do. That's the fundamental principle of point and shoot. Then you might start getting lessons, or you start getting instruction or feedback. You might post a form check, and you're told the coaching things. Points don't matter, the target doesn't matter, it's all about building form. So now 100% of your focus is in form, and your coach or your instructors or your peers will start giving you those buzzwords: maintain back tension, have a clean release, and all the focus is on what you are doing here. However, there is a disconnect between what you were told to do and how you are meant to do it. It may even reach the point where everything you do is structurally fine. But then why does the arrow still not hit what you want to hit? And that might be puzzling for people who are only looking at this. It may be that you've executed the perfect shot, but you're simply aiming in the wrong place. Now, if you or your coach are only looking at one angle from one frontal point of view, you might not see that you are aligned completely different to what you were trying to shoot at. And that's something which can be missed because of the fixation on tiny details. You will often hear things like, oh, you need to have a clean release, or you shouldn't collapse and have a good back tension. And yes, these things are very important. We'll go through them later on. However, things like a bad release might cause this kind of grouping where things are slightly spread out. But if your groupings are here and they're up here and they're over here, that's not the result of a bad release or bad back tension. There's a much bigger fundamental fault which you have to examine. And that's why we have these three principles, the 3 A's of accuracy. That's aim, anchoring, and alignment. A big problem may come down to one of these 3 things. Even the smaller problems for more experienced archers at longer distances may reflect a fault in one of these 3 things. These 3 fundamentals of aiming, anchoring, and aligning should be learned together. I am, however, going to explain this sequentially in the order a first-time learner will most likely encounter these problems. The idea is that I'm going to give you a structure in how to troubleshoot issues. That's why for a learner, they're going to want to know how to aim first. So we want to know exactly what good aim looks like. If the aim is fine, we'll then go through whether their anchor is correct, because if that doesn't work, then this doesn't work. And if both are fine, we'll finally look at alignment. And this is something I recommend to all archers going through their learning pathways, that when you're going through these issues, you revisit these things in that order. Because you don't want to guess that you've done these three things right. You want to know for sure. I'm going to explain aim and anchor together, because this is pretty much 3/4 of your accuracy. Remember, again, the arrow is a straight line. Again, we're assuming close distance. Further out, the line becomes more of an arc. But let's get the basics of shooting first. This straight line should go in a straight line into that target. A straight line requires 2 points of reference, not one, because one isn't a line, it's a pivot point. 2 will create a straight line, the front and the rear. This corresponds to the 2 fundamentals of aim and anchor. Aim allows you to decide where the front point is. Anchoring is where the rear point is. If either of these change, it also changes the direction of the shot. Ideally, you want to have at least one consistent, and in most cases, it's the anchor, and we can therefore shift how we move the front of the arrow. But let's say we are practicing at a set distance, fairly close, we know it's going to be a straight line. Let's make sure that this front point is in the same spot every single time. The most important thing with aiming is to pay attention. Don't guess where your reference point is. There is a style called instinctive shooting where you basically look at the target and your arrows will go there. If you're doing precision shooting and you want to get the maximum points, that vagueness isn't good enough. There's no reason why you can't deliberately shoot this arrow in the same spot every single time. But to do that, you have to make sure it is pointed at the same spot every single time with the least amount of variation. Now, if you're using a sight, you need to know for sure that your sight ring is on that gold spot. You have to know for sure that the string is not too far left or right of your sight. If you're shooting with a bare bow aiming method like gap shooting, then you need to make sure that the point of the arrow is placed over the same spot on the target every single time without variation. This is called string picture. If you ignore your string picture, then you don't know what you are doing. And unfortunately, our string picture is very momentary. It doesn't stay in our consciousness. Once you line up and you shoot, it's gone. I cannot ask you, what was your string picture? Because you don't have that photographic memory I can download and go, oh, it was actually off. Because only you can see what you see. I can't see that as your coach. No one else can see it. But if you don't remember what it looked like, then you cannot repeat the shot deliberately next time. And I'll say this a lot in this demonstration. Autopilot is the worst enemy of consistency. I might shoot one decent shot. It might be the right level. But can I do it second shot? I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing right now. Ignore my form. I'll talk about that later. But I'm currently not actively thinking about where I'm putting the arrow. To me, it's somewhere on the target. Can I hit golds at this distance? That's 5 meters away. Yeah, of course I can, without trying too hard. But double this distance. Go to 30 meters, go to 50 meters. And suddenly, this grouping is nowhere near good enough. It's going to spread out and be unscorable. Since we can't save our string picture into our mental memory, we have to make sure we get it right before we shoot. We must guarantee it, not guess, but identify and communicate what it is. We say it and we do it. Let's say I don't know what my reference point is. We're starting day one, first shot. I'm gonna default to putting the tip of the arrow into the gold. Now I'll know where it lands, but I'll demonstrate this. I'm going to say to myself, arrow on gold. I say it and I do it. Arrow on gold, and of course it's high. I know that. But what I told myself was to make sure I put the tip of the arrow on that gold. I did not continue and shoot until I know the tip of the arrow is on the gold. Now, at this distance, that's way too high. So we're going to correct. I will now pick a different point. I know I have to aim lower. I will only change one thing. I won't change anything else. I'm simply going to point to a different spot. But I don't guess. I will call it and correct it. I will now say, I will point the tip of the arrow at the bottom of the white ring. So, tip of the arrow, bottom of the white. And it's slightly low. I'll do one more correction. This will now be tip of the arrow, bottom of the black ring. So bottom of the black ring. And I'm in the middle. Again, my form here isn't perfect. I'm just correcting for aim. The important thing is I'm calling out what I'm doing and I know exactly where I'm aiming. For gap shooting, my eyes are not on the gold where I want the arrow to go because I have to aim off. My eyes are on the arrow below at the chosen reference point. Whatever my point is, I will look at it and I will make sure that I will put the arrow there. Now let's verify that. I will go through the exact same steps. We're not going to autopilot and assume that we do the same. We say it and we do it. So, arrow on the black. Right in the middle. We'll do it again. Arrow on the black. And we do it again. Arrow on the bottom of the black ring. 3 shots, same spot. Now, is this good marksmanship? No, it's only 5 meters. I'm not trying to show off here. The key is though, this was deliberate. I called everything I did and I got the arrows in the same spot pretty much every time. Better refinement of my technique will make this better. But for those who are wondering what the secret of archery is from day one, it's this. Know where you are aiming. Don't guess where you're aiming. I knew exactly where to aim to hit this spot. I say it's down here, it will hit here. If I don't hit here, it's because I didn't put it down here. It's that simple. This is the first 50% of archery. Just know what you are looking at and what you are aiming at. This simple step of identifying what you are aiming at, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate advanced archer using sights, it's forgetting to identify your point of reference. There's a reason why in many professions you have checklist items, in surgery, in piloting, for train drivers. You're meant to point out what you are going to do and then you do it. You check that you've done it correctly before you move to the next item. If you don't check that this step is correct, then every other thing you do is going to be pointless. It's already off in the wrong direction, literally. The second fundamental principle is anchor. We've identified that as a straight line, you need 2 points of reference. We've talked about aim, and that is the front of the arrow and where it's pointed on target. We now need to make sure that our anchor, the back reference point, is the same every single time. So even though we might have the same forward reference, if this is different with each shot, then the arrow will go in a different direction. And we'll demonstrate. Same reference point, bottom of black. Okay, that's slightly above gold. But now I'm going to ignore my anchor point. I'm going to go a little high. Let's say I drift. I go bottom of black. Oh, it's low and left. Oh, who knew that? Let's do it again. We'll fix that. I go, well, I'm aiming bottom of black. Bottom black. Oh, it's there now. Huh. Well, you can see what I'm doing wrong, can't you? This is drifting. Because anchoring is so important and in fact quite unique to archery, this is probably the one thing which you're taught to do when you're doing archery in a class, or something which you might learn very quickly if you're teaching yourself. But for those who haven't been taught this or are teaching yourselves, let's identify exactly what anchoring is. It is picking a very specific spot on your face as a reference point. The more consistent and tighter it is, the better. You will see variations. You'll see, for example, Olympic style shooters will anchor quite low along their chin and have a second anchor point on their nose and a third point across their lips. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Works quite well for using sights, can be hard without a sight because there's such a big gap between the eye and the anchor point. So often traditional shooters or bare bow shooters will use different reference points closer to the eye. For example, it might be towards the corner of the mouth or a cheekbone, or they might use a finger on a tooth or a middle finger. Some will shoot 3 under and touch their cheek and go closer to eye level. Ideally, the closer to the eye, the easier it is to align, although at long distances it matters a bit less. The second factor is I'm wearing glasses, so I actually can't go straight to the eye. I'm going to pick a lower point. That doesn't matter. If I know what my aim point will be, I just need to use the same reference point, it will go there. I don't have to calculate in my mind each time. I know that point, I know this point. So let's create a point. And like we said before, we articulate it, we say it, and we do it. Now for this demonstration, I'm going to use corner of mouth. Very easy point for beginners. Not the only point you can use. You can advance and choose a different point that's more comfortable for you and your face shape, but let's start with something simple. Corner of mouth. I'll say index finger, corner of mouth. We say it, we do it. Arrow in black, corner of mouth. Now do the same thing. Arrow in black, corner mouth. And so on. Now it's important to point out that processes and references should be adaptive. You don't just go with one and use that forever. You have to adapt if things don't work. And I've learned in the last couple of shots that with my chosen reference point, I'm actually shooting a bit high. So instead of going for the black, I'll go for the white. So I'll say now, arrow in white, corner of mouth. Oh, it's too low because I wasn't aiming at the white. I was aiming below the white. Let's actually tell ourselves to do it and do it properly. Arrow in the white, corner of the mouth. We're in the middle, right away. Do the same thing. My point of the arrow is right on that white circle in the middle. So on the white, corner mouth, in the gold. It's adaptive. If my sights don't work or my reference points are different, I make a point to change it. But I will always say what it is, so I program and preload what it looks like, then I do it. That part and this part. And that is now 80% of archery. You've got your 2-point reference, you've got your front, you've got your rear, you can identify things. It will get harder as you go further back and smaller targets, but you've done that, you've done archery. But what if it still doesn't work? What if you have aim at the same spot every single time? What if you have the exact same anchor every single time? You've done yourself picture perfect. You can film yourself and go, yep, exactly the same. What is missing? If this is in line, the last question is, are you in line? And this is where we finally talk about the thing which everyone says is most important, form. I'm doing it third because unless you get those two things right first, so even form doesn't matter. You can shoot with good form, but if you're not pointing in the right direction, it's completely misleading. It tricks you to think you're doing something wrong. So the easy things first, aim and anchor, and then we talk about your body structure and alignment. Let me show you what this means. So I will show you 3 different shots. I will say the same thing each time. Arrow on the white, corner of mouth, but watch where things happen. Okay, That was pretty good. Right in the middle, I'll do the same thing. Arrow on white, corner of mouth. Well, that was low, it's weird. I'll say it again. We're going to go arrow in white, and that didn't quite go there either. I correctly identified exactly every step I was doing. The point of the arrow and my anchor point. These were exactly the same. The arrow was more or less pointing the right direction. But the last thing was what drove the arrow to move the way it did. And that is where this is going or where this is going. This is the fundamental of alignment. If you are not in line with your shot, you are going to affect the way it flies in every direction. And this is why we pay attention to form. Now, the unfortunate thing with diagnosing form is that you're often told what it is that you are lacking. It might be no back tension. It might be having a stiff release. But you're told to do things like have more back tension or think about a smooth release. These are not fixes. These are things which cannot happen unless you have the right alignment. We are teaching people in the opposite way. You cannot attain the solution without knowing what the right alignment is first. Let me show you. What I think is the most common fault form-wise is the wrist. And that affects the elbow and that affects the shoulders and the back. All these things, elbow, shoulder alignment, are fundamental in alignment, but they're all driven by faults caused in other parts of this process. And fundamentally, it's this part. Many beginners really have trouble relaxing and unlocking this wrist. You will see that when they shoot, when they pull it back, the wrist is already stressed and tense and bent before they even start pulling it back. When they pull it back, it's still locked in position. This is why you have the high elbow syndrome, or you might have the chicken wing that's sticking out this way, or it might be really low here. This is all caused by stress on that wrist. Because once you get to your anchor point, you can't unlock that wrist. You can't just go from here and change your elbow. It's locked in. You cannot move that. And the reason why it's so locked and tense is because of a hyperfixation on using the hand to touch the anchor. You're told, don't move your head, move your hand. But because you are now 100% looking at your hand, you're going to go, okay, watch my hand, and hand has to go here, but you're paying no attention to what's moving your hand in that direction. You are using your hand to move, not your arm. This whole arm must move as one unit. The hand isn't what's driving it. If this is tight and sore and tense, you're definitely doing it wrong. The hand is just a hook. It's allowed to be pulled by the bow with your whole arm. Think of it as your wrist being allowed to stretch out. A good test with you or somebody else is to pull on someone or the other hand and watch that wrist stretch out like this. In the old days, when they cut the hands of thieves, they would cut at this point here. They'll stretch the hand out and chop here. That's how you remember that this is meant to be relaxed. If you're fighting it like this, then it's way too tense. You can't unlock this. To unlock this whole part, you let the hand stay straight and relax. It's just a hook and the whole arm moves. You drive this motion using the triceps and the laterals. That movement is what gets your arm moving together in one unit. Knowing that this has to be relaxed and this drives the motion, we can now focus on alignment, and that is to get your elbow in line with the arrow. Now, I'm not holding the bow, but the principle is try and get the elbow behind your head. Neck level, eye level, ear level, somewhere around there, you'll get the feeling. But you need to get this elbow back in line here. That is alignment. The reason why this is important, not only is it aligning your shot and your body together, it's also opening up your back muscles to be used. This is what we mean by back tension. We say it, but we cannot use our back tension unless our elbow is the correct height and the correct position around behind us. Let me show you. If I keep my wrist locked and I cannot move my elbow back, this is what happens. I'll say the same thing. Arrow in white, corner of mouth, and it might hit that spot, and it did. But that was a really static and dead release. The things that I cannot do anything different. You might be told by someone giving you a form check, use more back tension, because there was none there. Let the hand follow through. Use a dynamic release. You hear these buzzwords, but you cannot do it unless you fix your alignment. You have to unlock that wrist and let the elbow come back. Otherwise, you get that common fault. Oh yeah, back tension. Okay, white, quarter mouth. All right, back tension, expand my hand, and then you might do that. It looks nice and dynamic, and hit the same spot there. Again, the first two things, aim and anchor, will actually solve most problems. But I know the arrow's gone slightly that way. It's actually come around a bit there. Hit the right spot, but it's angled. Why? Because I have to force my hand to come around. I'm plucking the string because I can't get it back straight. This again comes down to alignment. So now let's unlock that wrist. Let it relax, let it be pulled, and get the elbow back in position. It's the same thing. Arrow in white, quarter of mouth, elbow back. And you might notice immediately you might follow through, that was less force and much more natural. And I can feel that I've used this part, that part of the back and the shoulder muscles here. And it feels good. That's what I mean by a good shot. There's a bit of an oomph when you've used the right muscles. And the thing is, many beginners actually have never used that muscle group. That's what I mean by back tension. Not stressing and doing hard by pulling your back. It's getting your arm in line so you can actually move this and load onto it. That is good back tension, and that is good alignment. This is unfortunately something which we might not coach specifically enough. We might go through many other steps, but the whole alignment thing is so fundamental to accuracy, to get that line, all three things, arrow and archer, that you have to get this motion and direction correct. You can practice this without a bow, you can practice it with a stretching band, you can practice it with a bow, but you need to establish that you do have that range of motion, and most people do. But often when people hold the bow, they get so tense they can't get it. They can get it without the bow, but with the bow they can't. There's no reason why that's the case. The only reason why it happens is because of the mental fixation on the hand. It might be the anxiety, it might be the draw weight, it might be think of too many things at once. So instead of overloading every step in one process, make decisions. That's fine, let us relax, that's now fine. 3-point check, aim, anchor, and alignment. So let's put these three things together. Now again, aim, anchor, alignment are processes. They're fundamental principles. I need to turn it into a process which works for me. That's why I'm saying arrow on the white, corner of mouth, elbow around. These are action words which remind me what to do. I will say it and preload it in my mind so I know exactly what it looks like. So arrow in white, corner of mouth, elbow around. Arrow in white, corner of mouth, arrow, elbow around, right in the middle. And I might convert that to a simpler process. For me, it's actually cheek and check. It's to remind me, not only have I done it right, I've checked that this is right and that is right. I cannot allow myself to perceive the shot until I've checked that these things are all correct. Never guess, know that is there for certain. So, arrow on white, corner of mouth, elbow around, and we check. White, cheek, elbow around, check. Same spot. And if I'm confident, I might go through things more quickly, but I will never autopilot. I will consciously go through each step, make a faster decision but not make an automatic decision. I'll do it automatically. Right cheek, elbow. There we go. So here you see the proof. Unedited, you saw it, you heard it. 3 touching arrows. It's only 5 meters. It's not great marksmanship. I should be shooting at a longer distance target, a smaller target, one of these target faces. But still, touching arrows is what every beginner wants to get. This is like Robin Hood level splitting arrows danger. This is ideal. And what is great about this was that it was deliberate. It was live, it was purposeful. I caught it, I did every step of the way. I knew it would hit here. Was there any mystery? Did I think or hope that if I aimed somewhere here, it would roughly hit here? If I did that, it would be the groupings you saw at the very beginning of this video. Roughly here, maybe 1 here. But we identified very specific steps that I would use. Down here, over here, elbow around, every single arrow is the same. That's the idea of accuracy. Over longer distances, there's far more to refine. This will not turn you into an Olympic gold medalist. Of course not. There are so many other things. Yes, there's back tension, there's release, there's breathing, there's shoulder level, there's mental process, there's tempo. There's dozens of things which a professional archer must train up. But fundamentally, any mistake in accuracy comes down to one of those 3 things: aim, anchor, and alignment. And when I diagnose people having trouble shooting 70 meters, it might be, have you aligned correctly? And their elbow might not be in line. They can move further, then fix that. It might be they are moving their head position, the anchor's wrong, get that right. It might be their eyes are not focusing on the string picture. Maybe the sight is drifting somewhere else subconsciously, so we check that. We always check through these 3 basic fundamentals in our troubleshooting. Are you firstly, for sure, aiming in the right spot? If you're absolutely certain your aim is correct and your sight is the right level, then it must be something else. Are you sure your anchor is correct? If that is correct, for sure, then it must be something to do with your alignment. It's a way for us to walk through possibilities, not guess randomly, but go, okay, if this is right and this is right, are you sure this is right? And at some point, we'll find what the problem is. So again, this will not make you a champion. It will take you from day 1 to day 100. And that's a journey which many people drop out from because they can't reach this level soon enough. There's no secret to archery. They're just basic principles. Identify exactly what your process is, call it out, articulate it, command yourself to do it, and you start finding that shots are less random and far more deliberate. And this is archery. This has been a very big lesson packed in one. But I hope this gives you the right language, the right dialogue which you might use by yourself or with your coach to help diagnose the problems that you might face in your journey. Everyone goes through archery differently, but this applies to every style: compound, Olympic recurve, trad, Asiatic. The same principles are discussed, written about, and coached and taught in different ways, but the same principles apply. How you apply it to your archery, your style, your form, your preference, entirely up to you. I'm not teaching a process. I'm teaching the basic principles that you should have in your process, so that you one day have troubles later down the track, or even right now, you can now question yourself and then identify what exactly you need to do. Never guess, identify, assess, know, and then do it. Anyway, I hope you found this tutorial interesting and helpful. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time.